I have been a Provo for 15 years or more. Both Armalites and mortar bombs, I thought I knew the score. Now we have a weapon we've never used before.
Today, we're going to be talking about conducting an ambush in the style of a guerrilla force or a partisan force in a semi-permissive environment. For those of you who are just joining us and who have never seen any of the videos before, this is not going to be a strict U.S. military style ambush. There's going to be some things that are different. You can check out some of the past videos to kind of see what we're talking about and the scenario that's being talked about here as well. Again, this is all just informational, educational, you know, talking about Minecraft here. So just do with that information as you will. Anyway, let's get into it. Before we start talking tactics, I want to talk about kind of why you would conduct an ambush as a partisan, overall, you know, big picture wise, and some of the pros and cons about it. So getting into it, why you would conduct an ambush. Let's say you're in an area and there's an occupational force that's, you know, they're denying some movement. They have checkpoints set up, but overall, you know, things are business as usual. You're still able to go to work, still able to travel to an extent. So once you conduct that ambush, a couple things are going to happen, but the first thing that's going to happen is likely a crackdown on that area of operations from that occupying force, right? And what I mean is if things are kind of loose in regards to their doctrine and their checkpoints, they're denying movement across like a bridge or something like that, but overall, they're kind of just waving people through, maybe checking cars. After that ambush is conducted on them, they're going to start cracking down big time on the local populace. And many times what that will do is actually garner support for your guerrilla group, because the locals will start seeing what was before a nuisance from an occupying force as being now, you know, tyrannical. Whereas opposed to in the past, maybe they were just being waved through checkpoints or having their vehicles searched occasionally. Now it's full-blown, you know, military state. Everything's being restricted. Access is denied to certain areas and travel gets much more difficult. So you're gaining support from the local populace after conducting that ambush because of the reaction of the occupying force. The chaos and area denial aspect of it. Again, once that ambush happens, if this is happening in an area of operations that is not really a hot spot, there's not a lot of enemy or, you know, fighting going on, that's gonna kind of sow chaos in the ranks there. It's gonna demoralize the occupying force and they're gonna start buttoning up. Maybe they had some lightly guarded checkpoints or things like that. Possibly what's gonna happen is they're gonna draw into kind of more hardened points, hardened structures, and being more deliberate about things. What that can do is actually give you freedom of movement. Maybe before there was 4 checkpoints in an area that had 2 or 3 guys. Maybe now they only have 1 in the area with 10 to 15 soldiers occupying it, hardened point with, you know, belt-fed weapon systems. So that'll give you maybe a little bit more breathing room from getting to point A to point B, and a little bit easier to get around these hardened points as opposed to where before maybe there was, you know, 4 or 5 checkpoints around an area. Just things like that, something to consider. It's also gonna give some area denial to the enemy, whereas before maybe they were moving from point A to point B routinely, no issues. After that ambush happens and is conducted on them, again, they button up and they're much more deliberate in their movements. They're not as lenient to just send out couriers or you know, supply runs, things like that. Now it's just going to make things harder for them. They're going to know that there's, you know, guerrilla group operating in the area, and they're going to have to button up and get a little bit sharper in their movements. Also, a big one, Che Guevara, the communist bastard, was a big proponent of this. Anytime a partisan force engages the enemy, victory pretty much needs to be assured so that you can replenish ammunition and weapons. In addition to ammunition and weapons, any sensitive items like night vision you may be able to collect off the enemy, radios, which would be awesome for obviously eavesdropping on their comms, anything like that, worth considering. These are all kind of the pros and the overall strategy of the ambush. The cons, I like to use the Bloody Friday and the Bloody Sunday attacks by the IRA. But just like you can gain support from a populace once the enemy cracks down on you, you can also lose support very easily. It can have a reverse effect, right? That can backfire. Whereas rather than them being mad at the tyrannical occupying force, imposing restrictions on them, they start pointing the finger at the guys that did the attack. And it's easy to lose support in an area like that. It really is just, it's all dependent, right? Second off, harsher occupation, we talked about this, but maybe whereas before the restrictions were a little bit more lenient and people were moving through checkpoints, things like that freely. Now, after their guys are, killed, they're going to be much harsher in everything they do. Harsher restrictions, sanctions, things like that, probably denying movement for your average civilian in the area of operations a little bit more. And then also, it's going to make your presence known, right? Again, we kind of talked about this, but if you're in an area where there's been no guerrilla activities and all of a sudden, you knock off a couple vehicles driving down the road, they're going to know that there's people in that AO operating, which, is pros and cons, right? That's why we're doing this list. But anyway, that's just kind of the grand strategy of why you conduct an ambush, all the points we talked about here. Target selection for your ambush. That you never want to attack any sort of element that could possibly gain fire superiority on you, right? No armored columns, no troop transports that are carrying an infantry platoon with a bunch of bolt feds, right? It's a great way to get chewed up and get killed really quickly. Small command elements. If this is a semi-permissive environment, you're going to have small command elements running around with minimal security, supply runs being conducted by, soft skill troops, things like that make a great target for an ambush for your actions on portion. If you find yourself in a fair gunfight as a partisan, things went wrong, and that's when I suggest start breaking contact. So if you open up on a deuce and a half that you think was carrying, food and radios, and an infantry platoon starts jumping out of the back and starts getting fire superiority on you, that's when I would recommend breaking contact and peeling off that attack, because again, your life's not worth throwing away in a fair gunfight. So I'm gonna apologize for my piss poor terrain model, but just bear with me here. When you're looking for the proper terrain to conduct an ambush on, I know this is very area dependent, but in my area, we have a lot of elevation and we also have a lot of swamps and things like that. So what I'm looking for in a place to conduct an ambush, ideally, is going to be somewhere with some elevation near a curve in the road. Elevation to be able to put your support by fire maneuver elements on. We'll talk more about that. And then this curve in the road is typically where you want to conduct an ambush, right? It allows you to get into a proper L shape. Over here, we have this representing a swamp. Any sort of terrain like this that denies the enemy's freedom of maneuver once the ambush is initiated is great, because it'll keep them from leaving the kill zone once you initiate that ambush. So this area is represented, again, you've got your good, your hook in the road, terrain that's going to deny the enemy's ability to either drive off or try to exit on foot, and then good terrain to, utilize as cover, concealment, and have that terrain advantage against your enemy. This over here is a bridge. This isn't necessary, but if you have an area in your operations that is similar to this, bridges are great choke points because they're much easier to block off than a road. Again, if there's a bridge here, it's going to mean that there's some sort of ditch or something that a vehicle is not going to cross. So dropping a tree or something like that across a bridge is a great choke point to get the enemy's vehicles to stop. So again, this is just analyzing the terrain, something like this. I'm going to use a term a lot that's MET-TC. That just means mission, enemy, time, terrain, a couple other things. But essentially what that means is it depends, right? It's all dependent on your situation. I'm just kind of giving you some things to think about here, but there's going to be certain aspects of an ambush that's in a little bit less than doctrinal style that's going to be, it's going to be up to you, really. It depends on your terrain. If you're in the upper Midwest and you don't have any sort of elevation that you can work off of and you have a lot of row crop, then you're going to have to get creative with it and how you can conduct that ambush. All right, so we analyze the terrain, and before we really start getting into tactics here, let's talk about the equipment that's preferable or needed. So first off, you're going to have two main elements of your ambush. There's going to be a support by fire. These guys are going to be primarily stationary, and then you're going to have a maneuver element. Your third element is going to be your security components, and that's when this is going to get a lot less doctrinal, and we're going to elaborate that on once we start talking tactics here. But So for your support by fire guys, because again, you're in a semi-permissive environment, how you get to the objective is really up to you. I would not ever suggest a guerrilla group setting up an objective rally point prior to the ambush. We're going to talk about that once we get back into the map. But essentially, you want to get there as low key and low vis as possible. But again, for your support by fire element, they're going to want the lion's share of the ammunition provided on the target. You know, last time we talked about some non-standard weapons. Let's say you have a 6-man or an 8-man ambush team, and you have 2 ARs and 2 AKM platforms, a Mini 14, a shotgun, and 2 PCCs, right? I would give the support by fire guys the best weapons platforms, which would be your 2 ARs and your 2 AKs, right? Your maneuver element can get away with things like shotguns, pistol caliber carbines, and, you know, like maybe like a Mini 14 or something less desirable, less effective than kind of your more standard weapons. So for the SBF dudes, I would recommend maybe something like a heavier chest rig. Armor is always preferable, but again, it's all mission dependent. Something like this chest rig here can fit up to 12 magazines in it. That's a lot of ammo, but again, these guys are going to be doing the majority of the killing in our Minecraft world, right? So again, for kit, heavier chest rigs. For an ambush in the style of the partisan, I would not recommend your 2nd and 3rd line sustainment gear, right? You need water and you need ammunition. You don't need a belt kit with, you know, a cooking stove on it and a rolled up poncho, and, you know, unless it's just pouring down rain. But like, you don't need sleep system, you don't need sustainment for partisan activities like this. You need a hit and you need to get out of there, right? So sustainment isn't really necessary in this scenario. You need water and ammunition, and the support by fire guys need the majority of the ammunition for it and the best weapons. Comms, absolutely no cell phones on a target like this, right? Goes without saying. Radios need to be used very conservatively, right? Flares can work when you're doing a shift and lift fires, which we're going to get into, and a flaming rock. A flaming rock, you can look this up. I don't have one here to represent what I'm talking about. I apologize, but essentially it's a rock or an object, a brick, that's traditionally wrapped in VS17 panel, which is just orange material. However, that stuff's kind of overpriced. You can go to the store and get like multicolored duct tape, or you know, you can even use like the pink engineer tape and stuff that's all over the place. Something that's really high visible, tied around a rock with a long tail on it. So when you throw it, it looks like a rock that's on fire, right? But anything like that will work. Any sort of high vis item with material coming off it that both elements can see if you have to throw that for a shift and lift fire. Your maneuver element, again, they can get away with less ideal weapons, things like PCCs, maybe shotguns, or like non-standard, you know, Mini 14s, things like that. They're gonna obviously be firing too, but they're gonna be closing with the enemy, who are hopefully, you know, non-combatants at that point. Comms, same thing with them. Radios need to be used conservatively, absolutely no cell phones, and the same flaming rock flares, things like that. Bags, right? The maneuver element ideally needs to have empty assault packs or duffel bags, anything that they can collect weapons, ammunition, and sensitive items off that target, right? So once they push through the objective, anything that you expend, you hope to replenish. So again, enemy weapons, pulling radios out of vehicles, you know, documents off of guys that, you know, bodies you're searching in Minecraft, right? Anything that can be taken off the target needs to be taken off the target and can be reasonably carried in an assault pack or a duffel bag, anything like that. Your security element are going to be the guys that are on the outer extremities of the ambush site. But because this isn't a doctrinal raid, these guys are essentially just need to communicate when the enemy is coming into that area of operations, right? And we're going to talk more about that in a minute, but I don't really find it necessary for them to have a weapon on them, which probably be better not to, just because there's some complications there. We'll get into it next, talking about the tactics in the actual ambush. In addition to, all your equipment, I just want to reiterate that this is essentially a crime scene, right? So gloves are always going to be necessary. Balaclava, some sort of face covering, are just as important as the rest of your kit that you might utilize on a target like this. Wiping down ammunition, not carrying any sort of incriminating evidence like IDs, some sort of, business card, wallets, anything like that. You don't want any of that on a target like this that could possibly incriminate you down the line. All right, here's our terrain model. Let's go over kind of the legends and what everything means. Up here, this is going to be your security element. Your second security element is going to be down here. This is representing our swamp. This green lines are representing our elevation and our hill. This is the bridge on the road we talked about earlier. This is your support by fire element. Over here is your maneuver element. These are your target reference points, these blue stars. And this red circle here is your kill zone, right? That's primarily where you want to engage the enemy. Now let's talk about our security elements. Earlier on the equipment list, we probably noticed that I said these guys don't need weapons. In a traditional ambush, these guys are in place, typically two-man teams with either a belt fed or like a grenade launcher or some sort of anti-armor. They're essentially to prevent reinforcements from coming onto the objective or preventing enemy from leaving the objective. Because we're not a conventional force, and this is a semi-permissive environment, these guys need to be blending in with their environment, and they're essentially just acting as your eyes and ears, your scouts, to let you know when the enemy is coming onto target. These guys can be, maybe you have a buddy who works for a road crew up the road that can radio and let you know that they're coming. Again, your communications need to be incredibly brief and encrypted. It can be as simple as, not saying, hey, they're coming, get the guns ready. It can be like, oh, Bill's here, or something like that. Something, just a simple phrase that lets everyone know the enemy is approaching the objective. Maybe you have a guy down here who's parked on the side of the road with his tire off to make sure there's no civilians coming. Maybe they're just hiding in the woods, but it needs to be something low-key, where is if they are stopped by some sort of security element in the area, some enemy element, they have deniability, right? And if it's two guys with chest rigs and long guns, that's not going to work. So ideally, these guys are just going to be able to blend into the populace and act as your eyes and your ears for when the enemy is coming onto the target. Let's talk about getting to the objective, right? Now, in a doctrinal ambush, there's going to be something called an ORP, which is an objective rally point. Your element's going to come up through the woods here, whatever. They're going to establish an ORP. You do a quick leader's recon, and then you start embedding your guys. Something to consider, in the United States, we have a lot of private land, right? So chances are both the sides of the roads here are owned by somebody who probably doesn't want you there. That's why it's important for that local support. Maybe they're one of your guys operating with you, but ideally not. But yeah, it's it's important to realize that it's probably not going to be necessary or even accessible, really, to be moving through your woods with everyone kitted up, putting in ORPs and maneuvering to the place. This is something that's kind of on the individual leading this, on how your guys get to the target. It could be something as simple as, a truck pulling up prior to the target and everyone, rolling out of the back, sprinting to the woods as quick as possible. Maybe there's a side road over here where you move up through quickly and quietly. But this is an actions-on event here. You don't need to be wasting time with doctrinal objective rally points, release points, things like that. You need to get here as quickly and quietly and low-key as possible. And you don't want to remain in this area for a long time, right? Just something to think about. However you get to that target is going to be up to you. But I would advise you not to use your kind of conventional means of maneuver. Actions on the objective. The enemy, let's say it's a command element in a light-skinned vehicle. Let's say it's some sort of enemy commander with a radio operator and two other guys with them. Let's say they all three have long guns and the commander has a pistol. Obviously, the radio operator has a radio. So they're moving north to south. Your security element has let you know they're in the area. Your commander, who is with the support by fire element closest to the maneuver element, so he can better command this battle space, is going to decide when to initiate that attack. You want the enemy to slow down or stop in that kill zone. Again, we talked about maybe, you drop a tree across the road that you have pre-staged, pre-cut. Maybe you pull a car across the road, something that makes them slow down. At that point, the commander is going to initiate the ambush, and both sides are going to start hammering that objective, which is, again, a light-skinned vehicle. Now, let's talk about our target reference points and shift and lift fires. These target reference points that we said allow the support by fire node not to shoot any further past that point towards the maneuver element, right? And your first TRP is just a kill zone, which is going to be the vehicle. Once the commander decides that he's ready for his maneuver element to start maneuvering forward and clear the objective, he's going to shift fire his guys to that second TRP. So what that would look like is he tells his guys to shift left, shift fire left, shift fire left. He's going to confirm that they're all shifted their fire to the second TRP point. Maybe they're not shooting at this point because everyone in the kill zone, all the Minecraft guys are dead. But, he's going to confirm that their far right limit is that second TRP, and no one's going to shoot past that. So he's going to say, shift fire left, shift fire left. They're going to shift fire. After he confirms that, he's going to radio to the maneuver element and tell them, hey, shift fire, shifted fire. The maneuver element is going to radio back, shift fire, bingo. That just lets the commander know that they got the message and they're good to advance to that next spot, maybe the edge of the road. So everyone's shooting. Maybe he calls a ceasefire, or maybe he just shifts fire left. Tell his guys to shift fire left. They've all shifted over here. And then he radios to the maneuver element, hey, we shift fire, shift fire. The maneuver element radios back, shift fire, bingo. Because it's like saying, bingo, we got it. You're shifted off. We're good to advance. So they're shooting here, shift fire. He's confirmed. He radios, hey, we've shifted fire. They radio back, shift fire, bingo. And then they can maneuver onto the objective. Ideally, there's not going to be any more shooting at this point, right? Hopefully everyone on the kill zone is dead. And so it's just kind of a watch and shoot where you're on that second TRP and the maneuver element starts pushing through the objective. Once they've cleared that objective, he's just going to shift these guys off. Before they get to that TRP, he's just going to say, hey, shift fire off the target and watch and shoot. So they're just going to be looking out here, right? Let's talk about the maneuver element's job and what that's going to look like when they clear through that zone. So again, these guys, maybe they're armed with a shotgun and 2 pistol caliber carbines and a Mini 14 or something. Ideally, everyone's going to have semi-automatic center fire rifles, but you never know. So both sides have opened up on that light-skinned vehicle, chewed it up. Maybe everyone's dead, or at least no one's firing back. Your maneuver element at that point is going to maneuver up, to the edge of that road. Probably 2 to 4 man buddy teams. 2-man buddy teams. And so if you got 4 guys, your 2 guys are going to bound up while the 2 guys in the back are covering. And then you're just going to clear through that objective, bounding like that. Something to consider about the development of this game is that because we're talking about Minecraft, at this time, the developers have no engine capabilities of taking prisoners, right? That's not a mechanic in this game, and your Minecraft soldiers can't take prisoners, right? What are you going to do with them? Are you going to keep them blindfolded for 2 weeks? How are you going to feed them? How are you going to keep your identity secure? So you can't take prisoners in Minecraft, people. Your maneuver element at this point, they're clearing through the objective. You can utilize buddy team bounding like we talked about. Or ideally, hopefully no rounds are coming back. Everyone in the kill zone is dead or dying. You could pick up and just clear through on a line. I would say every single body gets an extra love tap, in this game. You're going to clear the vehicle just to ensure there's no one else in it, which maybe I'll do a video later on actually clearing a vehicle. But it's kind of semantics, big picture stuff here. Your support by fire shifted off, and that maneuver element is just going to clear through that kill zone. Again, everyone gets an extra round of ammunition, probably in the head. Now, doctrinally, what will happen at this point is your maneuver element has cleared through. Your TRPs aren't really needed anymore. So your maneuver element has pushed through, and they're going to set up here, and they're going to say LOA, LOA. That just means they're at their limit of advance. Let's just say 30, 40 meters past the kill zone. And then doctrinally, what would happen is your support by fire element's going to get up and clear through and set up another LOA for security. What I would recommend is the partisan is once the kill zone is, cleared through, there's definitely no one alive, and your element over here is shifted through. I'm going to utilize these guys to immediately come back to the kill zone. Sorry, let me rephrase that. These guys have pushed through the limit of advance. Everyone's dead. If I'm that commander, I'm going to utilize my support by fire rather than clearing through again like doctrine would state. I would split it up into two elements, send one group over here quickly to pull security down this road in case something else is coming. Take this other half of my group, pull them up here, and pull security quickly. Simultaneously, while this is going on, I would be communicating with my maneuver element to run back to that kill zone and start picking up anything and everything that has value. Ammunition, guns, especially that radio off the radio guy, ID badges off of the enemy, any sort of uniforms possibly you could strip from them, right? So yeah, while the support by fire is breaking down and establishing security quickly, while you're listening to your security guys, making sure no enemies coming onto target, I want my maneuver guys with those assault packs and duffel bags to be stuffing everything they got off of the kill zone into those bags and getting ready to get the hell out of there, right? So your support by fire is over here, pulling security down the road. Your kill zone is dead. You've gotten up all the supplies. This needs to be like a bank robbery, guys, right? As soon as that first shot's fired and I'm the commander, I'm probably going to start a stopwatch. You want to be in and out of there as soon as possible, right? This isn't like you're not sitting around smoking cigarettes and, rolling guys over. It's quick and fast as you possibly can be so you can get off that objective. Now let's talk about egressing this objective. So you've gotten everything you need off the target. Your security guys can stay there, but at this point they can probably split because the rest of your guys are going to leave. Now, that's something for you to consider. How are you going to get off this target? Are you going to have a guy drive through the crime scene and pick everyone up and leave? That's probably not very smart, right? I would split my element up. I would probably want my support by fire guys to go one way, my maneuver element guys to go another way, to maybe pre-staged vehicles, buildings, whatever you have in the area, because you don't want 6 to 10 guys with firearms traipsing through the woods, right? Something else to consider, maybe you've pre-staged a dead drop or some sort of, safe house or something in the area where you can drop all your kit and weapons. Like maybe you have a damn Yeti cooler buried in the woods over here, so as your maneuver element breaks down, they're going to run over here, beat feet, going back to their pre-staged vehicle, whatever they have, on some back road. They can beat 3 feet over here and dump all their kit and weapons in some pre-staged, hiding spot in the woods or something like that. And your support by fire element can possibly do the same, right? You want to egress that target. Ideally, maybe you want to drop off your kit and weapons in a pre-established location to where if you are stopped, let's say you drop your kit and weapons, they go get in some vehicle over here and take off, and they're stopped at a checkpoint. They don't see 4 dirty dudes with, firearms and ammunition on them. That's pretty incriminating, right? You have to treat this whole thing like it's a crime scene. Ideally, you would be splitting in 1s and 2s, but it might draw more attention to have a bunch of vehicles suddenly taking off from the area. These are just considerations to think about. Treat this like it's a bank robbery, right? Everyone wears gloves. Everyone wears balaclavas, nothing, no cell phones on the target, nothing like that. Just something to consider. But essentially, this is kind of a broad strokes purposes how to conduct an ambush in the style of a partisan.